Hello, and welcome to Leveraging Firewall Rules and Policies for Effective Attack Surface Management. Today's webinar is sponsored by Firemon and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great session, we do have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of it. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. So not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a solution brief from Firemon about reducing risk. It's a quick two-pager with a lot of good information in it about real-time visibility and controls to remediate important vulnerabilities. So feel free to access that PDF now or at any time during the presentation. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can also be found in your handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of an event like this is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenter. So to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So after the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. All right, with all that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic session. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We have Lisa Wallace, who's Senior Security Advisor for Firemon. Lisa, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, I'm going to turn things over to you. Take it away.
Perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located. We are here today to talk about attack surface mapping and how to use Firemon or other platforms. We're going to talk a lot about generalities too. What you can do to effectively map your attack surfaces and look at your firewall rules. Obviously, we're Firemon specific perspective here. We're going to talk about what the basics of attack surface mapping are, what the role of your firewall policies are, what you can do for your organization, and how to keep it going on a continuous basis, because it's not a one and done. You don't do it one day and say, okay, that's it, I'm secure. Our first poll question is, how familiar are you with attack surface management concepts? Very, somewhat. I've heard of it, or I don't know anything about it. And there's not a wrong answer here. I'd just kind of like to know where we're talking from. Okay, it looks like we've got about 60% heard of it, but not much detail. The rest is pretty evenly split between very familiar and somewhat familiar. I'll give you just another minute to answer. Oh, we got some first introductions. Great, happy to have you here. And we'll give it just another, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 seconds. It looks like the experience in the room is less familiar rather than more familiar, which is awesome. Do go ahead and pop questions as we go into that chat. We'll circle back and answer as many of those as we possibly can. Any that we don't get to live today, we'll be happy to circle back with you and get them answered. Okay, we're still predominantly heard of it or don't know anything about it. So let's go ahead and get started. What is attack surface management? And I talk about this with clients a lot. And one of the places I begin is you're familiar with attack surface management, you just don't know it. Let's think about your house. You start with your house. What is your attack surface? Well, you're going to put locks on your doors. You may put locks on your windows. You may have got to have a fence in your backyard. We're going to do the same basic kind of things with your firewalls, your network infrastructure, all of your various resources. First thing you begin is, what do I have and where is it? Identify, manage, reduce your attack points. You don't want to leave a window to your house open. You don't want to leave a firewall rule that leaves something hanging out in the breeze either. How do firewall rules contribute to that? You'll hear me say this a few times during the webinar. One of my favorite formulas is risk equals vulnerability times access. If you've got valuables in your house and those are vulnerable, access is where the risk is at. Same thing for your network infrastructure and how your firewalls are going to help protect that. How are we going to reduce that attack surface, and how are we going to help you prevent that unauthorized access? This is a graphic. I've actually done this on a napkin. This is much better than my usual napkin. Story that I like to tell is I was working one time. I do some pro bono work with nonprofits. And I was working with a nonprofit, and their web designer said to me, I can build you a website where that data is more secure than you having this information on the computer in your home. And I sat down and said, well, yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. And what I drew out on the napkin is very close to what you see here. What's our attack surface? Attack surface on your network is going to be open ports, things that you've got out there that you may or may not know about. What is externally facing? What old services do you have? I used to do penetration testing. We found frequently we would find like an old version of something like a Jenkins hanging out where there was a vulnerability that was wide open on the internet, didn't have an ACL, an access control list around it, and there's an active vulnerability. What technologies are running on the targets? Can your penetration tester, can your attacker footprint those? What can they find out about you and your organization from that? What have you got hanging out there you don't know about? What was set up in the corner by somebody for maybe a development project? Maybe it was set up, somebody's pet project for a very brief period of time. They left, or the project was abandoned, and everyone literally forgot it was there. What inadvertent exposures do you have? What do you have that you don't know about? And what insecure protocols do you have hanging out there? I've also done a change approval board, CAB review, and operations will come to me and say, yeah, we have to have FTP. The vendor says we need it. No, you don't. But a lot of times, depending on the organization, somebody may have given you a do not pass go card, and you've got FTP hanging out there somewhere. You've got Telnet. You've got insecure protocols hanging out. So what are we going to do with this information? Firewalls are the doors and windows in your house. They are in my example with the web designer, I've got a firewall in my house. I've got built-in protections in my modem. I've got the firewall on my equipment. I've got several layers there. Where if you're looking at a web ecosystem, you're looking at something more like your network, where all of your services that are potentially available are vulnerable. Have you got themes running? What else is out there that you can get to? What rules is going to do, it's going to be those locks. It's going to be the doors, the windows, the locks, your screens, your fence that keeps the dog from getting out. And we're going to help you prevent misconfigurations. What did you do that you didn't mean to do? I tell a lot of stories, so I used to also do incident response along with penetration testing, and I do miss trying to break into things. I'm on the flip side now. I hope people defend. But one of my favorite stories is I was doing incident response for a company where they were new to Azure. They're implementing in Azure. They intended to use one of the Azure servers as a jump host. You can get from this Azure host to something else in the ecosystem. They intended to open up RDP, port 3389, outgoing, egress. Due to simply a lack of familiarity, because God knows we're all human and we have all done this, they accidentally opened it up ingress as well. So 3389 could come in. They had an attacker in, and no big surprise, I was there to do incident response. So when you're looking at something like NSPM, Network Security Policy Management, like Firemon, we can put some safeguards in place and say, hey, you meant for this to go out, but you've got an internal policy that says this can't be in. You can't allow 3389 in. Did you know this is a problem? Let's get this cleaned up. We want to put those safeguards, those walls around your environment. We have another poll. How often do you review and optimize your firewall rules? Do you do it regularly? Do you do it occasionally? Do you do it rarely? Or you don't know. You're not in that sphere. One of the things that I will frequently run into is people that do it, but maybe they only do it for the part of their network that is subject to PCI. They're not doing it for the network ecosystem as a whole, which is great for PCI, but you've got potential for those forgotten accesses, the misconfigurations, the ingress is allowed as well as egress in the portions of your network you're not putting that lens on. Looks like about 57%, we're hopping up there. Over half of our respondents are saying they do it monthly or quarterly. Monthly, you are really impressive. And I'm really curious if you're doing it with a Firemon or something along those lines, because it's difficult to do. One of the clients that I was talking to about using our policy optimizer, which they're going to rename it and take away my best joke, does everything except optimize your policy. It's rule lifecycle management. They said they were doing it prior to policy optimizer. They were doing this review with spreadsheets. And they would do them every 6 months. They would get them done. They'd take about 2 weeks off and they'd start again because it took 5.5 months to get through it with Excel. So we've got about 27%, about a quarter of our people are doing it annually. About 20% of you are not sure. And over half are doing it monthly or quarterly. That's really darn impressive. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how we're going to align those firewall policies as part of your attack surface management. It's not the whole picture. You've still got your physical security. You've still got the other things that are your attack surface. But let's start with your electronics. You've got to get your firewall policies protecting your ecosystem, your network infrastructure. What are you thinking about? What are you not thinking about? What do you have in place for? Have you prioritized your assets? Have you prioritized your firewalls? I talk to a lot of people that come in, they say, okay, we've got Firemon. I don't know where to begin. I always begin with, where's your keys to the kingdom? Where's the highest value assets in your organization? What keeps your company going? What perimeter firewalls are around them? Let's start on the outside and let's work our way in, similar to our napkin drawing back there. Where's the highest priority? Where's the outside edge? Then let's work into your DMZ and then work internally from there. Again, breaches. Breaches are not only going to cost you reputationally, they're going to cost you in data loss. They're going to cost you in client notification. If you're in a regulated industry, it's going to cost you in potential compliance fines. So let's get those unintended exposures out of there. And back to my favorite formula, unnecessary access. Risk equals vulnerability times access. Adapting and knowing. I have run an ecosystem with 800 some on firewalls. There is no one person that's going to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to leverage this and we're going to help you look at this at more strategic level rather than having to manually go through and know what's on those 864 firewalls. We need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to look at things. We need to be able to look at them quickly. And rule optimization. Why? Again, back to my paper napkin example. Unnecessary access is unnecessary risk. The number of clients I've walked into, and I've got a guide for starting with our best practices that we use internally. Best practices starts with the simple stuff. Where do you have that FTP hanging out? Where do you have SSH, but it doesn't have any zone controls around it? Where do you have Telnet? If you have to have some of these things, are there what they call in the compliance field compensating controls? Let's close the gaps. Let's prioritize. Talk a lot about a crawl, walk, run approach. We start with your best practices. Where's the biggest concern? If you are one of the people that is assessing your firewalls monthly, more power to you. We probably still want to give you a once-over and catch all those, what I call the stupids. The FTPs, the Telnet, the HTTP, things that you're not thinking about, things that maybe you're not aware of. Maybe you've got DNS going outside the building and you don't want that to be happening. You may be more at a walk or run stage, though, where we want to look at what do you have going on that may be something like a VNC or other kinds of viewers or things like that. And one of the really important things that I talk to people about is don't just look at your ingress, look at what's coming in, look at what's allowed to go out as well. What's outdated and redundant rules? What do you no longer need? One of my favorite things in Firemon is what we call TFA, traffic flow analysis. Most of any firewall analysis is backward looking. It is what happened. What firewall rules do I have in place? When were they changed? It's historical. TFA is one of my favorite things that we have the ability to do, and it is great for this kind of attack surface mapping because it's going to look forward. Okay, I have a rule. I've done my attack. I've done my napkin. I have done my attack surface mapping, and I've decided these 3 firewalls here are my most critical firewalls. They are panorama based. They're running Palo Alto. I'm going to take the Palo Alto that protects my keys to the kingdom, and I'm going to run traffic flow analysis on that rule. What it's going to show me is during a period of time, what came in and out of that rule. Remember where I said it's equally important to look at egress, what's going out versus ingress. What's leaving, what's coming in. Do I have services in there I can get rid of? I may have a rule in my perimeter firewall that is zone-based. This zone can talk to this zone and it can go external. And I've fine-tuned this as much as I want. And I've got a limited set of IPs, but I've got 17 services on there. Each one of those services is a potential attack surface, particularly if it's ingress as well as egress, coming in as well as going out. So let's take TFA, let's take a look at that and see, are all those services being hit? If there's 17 services and 5 of them don't get hit in 180 days, can you clean up that rule? Again, we can do a lot of this on an automated basis. Our compliance framework is completely open. Anybody can use it. I can show you how. We do publish assessments regularly. I'm getting ready to publish one probably within the next week for Azure for PCI. But anybody can do it. And I talk to people about compliance, and people want to go hide under the desk. So if you're hiding under the desk, stop. Let's go back to our napkin here. We've got our internal policies and procedures. We've taken our attack surface. We've mapped that out. What do my internal policies and procedures say? Maybe they say, we always have to do this thing and we can never do that thing. When I talk about compliance, I say I was a Firemon client. I use the compliance framework for all kinds of crazy things that have nothing to do with compliance. Because fundamentally, compliance is looking at things you care about. So I'm going to take my internal policies and procedures and I'm going to say I always need to have access to this weird port. Maybe I have a homegrown application or an application that is specific to my industry and it uses TCP 1742. Nothing else uses it. I want to know if a firewall rule goes in that blocks access to 1742 because that's critical to my business. That's what I call little c compliance. It's big C compliance is your PCI, your GDPR, your HIPAA. Some regulatory body said you must do the thing. But little c compliance is what keeps the wheels on, what keeps the lights on, what keeps your business moving. So let's look at what we should not be doing according to the policies and procedures of your company and what we should be doing. We need that 1742 open. Nobody else on the planet may have a need for that. Nobody outside of your industry may have a need for that. But it's going to shut your business down if a rule goes in. We can set that up. Again, compliance is a thing you care about. Set up something in the compliance framework to flag if a rule goes in that blocks access to that port. The benefit of this is Firemon's going to be looking all the time. As rule changes come in, you can set it up to say, hey, on device change, tell me if something goes off that blocks access to my port over here that I need for my business. It's going to look every time we get a change. You're not going to have a person that has to log on and do a query every day and see, is there anything that's blocking 1742? We're going to proactively find that for you. I don't want to eliminate your people. I want to help your people do a better job, and I want to have them spending time on what they need to be spending time on. We're going to streamline that effort. We're going to get rid of those services that you don't need while protecting the ones you do need. And we're going to keep not only that big C compliance, your regulatory compliance in check, we're going to get your little c compliance, the thing that keeps the lights on for your business going. Best practices. Again, I talk about best practices from our best practice assessment and best practices what you should be doing. Make sure that you're agile. Make sure, and I know everybody hates that word, it's a buzzword. Make sure that you can adapt as quickly as possible. If you're in a regulated industry, maybe you've got an ISAC, maybe you've got something like an InfraGard that comes to you and says, hey, we are seeing this IOC, this indicator of compromise. It's using this 6 weird IPs. You really need to take a look and see if you have ingress or egress in or out to these 6 IPs. You can plug those in. You can plug those into Firewall, save that as a query, save that up as a repeating thing, and save it as a report. Let me know if something changes. Let me know if I can see new access to these things. You can also plug in, if you've got something like a SOAR system, we've got a totally open REST API. SOAR comes in and says, hey, here we've got a threat. Show me the rules that are allowing access to this threat. Stay compliant. Again, big C, little c. Not only do you want to be, if you're in the utility space, NERC CIP or FERC, if you're in the medical space, HIPAA, you want to be compliant to those, but you also want to be compliant to your internal policies. You want to prevent fines. You want to prevent breaches. You want to prevent things that are going to cost your company money, and you want to do the things that are important to you. And then again, monitoring and updating regularly. If you're not using something like a policy optimizer, that rule lifecycle management, develop a rule lifecycle management. Firewalls should not be a Roche Motel. They should not be a thing where things go in and they never come out. Do you still need them? How are you going to do that review? How can we help you get out of those spreadsheets and into even something like a Firewall where we can help you set up repeating queries? Here are the things I need to make sure that are happening. Here are the things I need to make sure that are not happening. Auditing. Again, I know a certain segment of the room here is hiding under the table because audit is the A word. I love auditors. I've spent a lot of time with them. Identify your vulnerabilities. What have you got that is vulnerable? And this is where I talk a lot, and I talk about this internally, and I talk with it probably 20 times a week with various clients. Vulnerabilities fall into 2 different buckets to me. There is compliance. Is this vulnerability there? And there is security. Can you do anything with that vulnerability? What you want to prioritize is the one where maybe your vulnerability scanner has found it and it's actionable. Risk equals vulnerability times access. If there's a vulnerability, but it can't be manipulated, it should be lower on your scale for remediation than something that has an active threat, and for some reason you have to expose that for your business. I've been doing this work for 20 some years, and I can walk into any business and I always ask them, okay, where's your Windows XP machine? Where is your Windows 2000 machine? Where's your 2003 machine? Where's your 2008? And everybody gives me the deer in the headlights look, and I'm like, look, everybody's got one. Where's it at? Risk equals vulnerability times access. Let's put some controls around that. Let's put a compliance framework around that. You've got this 2003 machine over here. It's got legacy information on it. You have to keep it for compliance purposes. You can't trash that data, but you can't upgrade that system because it runs software that won't run anything newer. We can't close the vulnerabilities. Let's close the access. Let's set up a control that says there's an ACL. Only this one IP can get to that box over there. Alert me if something is able to get to that. Outdated rules, things you don't need anymore. Security gaps. Address anything that you've identified. If you suddenly have, PCI 4.0.1 came out recently. That's not a huge change, but let's say it was. It came out and it's a huge change. Now you've got to go back and see what's new, what's newly identified. What's InfraGard told you about? What's your ISAC told you about? What have you seen? Indicator compromise emails. Maybe you're chatting with people in your industry. What's new that you need to look at? And then again, maintaining your compliance, because especially if you're in any kind of regulated industry, that's important. I know you want to hide under the desk. I wanted to hide under the desk. One of my favorite compliance stories is I was in the utility space, and we had SOX. Anybody publicly traded falls under SOX. And we had a compliance lady named Barb. And Barb would start bugging us about the 20th of the month. I'm going to need that stuff by the 5th. And it took our team half a day each, 2 people, so 8 man-hours, a full day, to do SOX reports. We brought in Firewall. We set up our SOX environment, put those devices in a group. We set up the reports. We sent them to go to Barb on the last day of the month. We got 8 hours back. 2 of us were not spending a half a day doing this anymore. She didn't have to come beat us for our reports. They just arrived, and the auditors are happy. Auditors are so much more, they're very familiar with anything that's coming out of the NSPM, the Network Security Policy Management space. You're going to get a lot fewer questions on anything that comes out of NSPM, like a Firemon, than anything you did with a spreadsheet. With a spreadsheet, you've got human error. Where did this data come from? How did you compile it? Firemon's like, hey, we are looking at the rules. We've got the rules. We've got up-to-date changes. We're normalizing everything that comes in. And as of today, here's where my SOX presence is. And when I tell this story, I tell people, Barb was a really good baker. Somebody got cookies out of this, and it wasn't me. Might be a little bitter about that. But it's going to help you with those auditors. Those of you that are not the auditors that are hiding under your desk, it's going to make your life easier. Reducing your redundant access points. The bigger you are, the harder it is to know everything. So like I said, I used to sit on CAB. I used to sit on Change Approval Board. And one of the things we had to do every week, and one of the things Firemon can actually help you with as well. Okay, I've got a change. I need to go from this set of IPs to here. They need to go through the DMZ, and they need to go through this section of the network, or they may need egress. They may need to go out. Where are my devices? Do I make sure I've hit all the devices I need to? But more importantly, and where we talk about redundancy here, have I hit too many devices? Was I not sure which of my 7 checkpoints actually would handle this traffic, so I applied this rule to all of them? That may be an unnecessary attack surface we don't need to have allowed open. So let's look at where that actually traverses. Firemon's going to bring in the routes, the interfaces, the networking information from those devices, and we're going to say, hey, access path, I need to go from here to here. How do I get there? Maybe it's on 2 of those firewalls, not 7. So we can clean up those rules on the other 7, and we can help you protect that environment while reducing that attack surface. Streamline your configuration. Again, if we've got rule 17 places and we only need them 4, let's get those other 17 out of there. Strengthens your security. Again, risk equals vulnerability times access. Where do we have access? Let's lower that down. Even if there's vulnerabilities behind it, like that 2003 box you can't patch for some reason, if we can't get to it, nobody can leverage it. An attacker can't do anything with it. Again, least privilege. Least privilege should apply to anything. The only people that should have keys to my house are my daughter and my dog sitter, the people that are here frequently. Same for your business. The people that can come in should only be, maybe you've got a vendor that needs to come in and they need to send something, but maybe they only need to send it via SFTP. They've got 3 IP addresses they can come from, and they can't get any farther than your DMZ. Let's make sure they can't go anywhere else. Minimize risk. I'm not going to leave a key under a rock outside my house, because everybody checks those funky looking rocks outside people's house. Attackers are going to do the same thing to your network. They're going to go out and they're going to footprint. There's a lot of talk about IDS and IPS, and I think that is great technology. I would absolutely recommend looking at that. But the most skilled attackers are not noisy. They're not the people that are trying to brute force are not the people that are lighting up your IDS. They're going to be stealthy. They're just looking to footprint you and see where that rock might be sitting. It's going to enhance your compliance because, again, you're going to adhere to your regulatory compliance, whether you fall under GDPR, whether you fall under HIPAA, NERC-CIP, whatever you fall under from a regulatory basis, you're also going to do your internal policies and procedures. So privileged is going to be, maybe that's your admins that are inside only. Maybe that's the one vendor that can come in. Maybe you've got a critical reason they need to be able to get in all the way up into your network past your DMZ. But that should be restricted. Few IPs, few places they can go from there. Let's look at your rules. Task-based, what can they do? Maybe they only need a couple services. If they need to get to your DMZ and they need to SFTP a file once a month, either to or from you, that's all they should have access to. Let's make sure there aren't any other services on that rule. It was just easier to tack it on this other rule. But now you've tacked it on this other rule and there were 17 services and we really need 1. And then what do people need to do on a day-to-day basis? A lot of my clients, when they're looking at what we call golden rules, they've started to use Policy Planner, Firemon automation. They consider something like web browsing. TCP 443 is leaving the building, is so little concern to me, that can go. That may be a general thing. That may be something you don't want to keep a really close eye on, where you're going to spend your time focusing on the ports, the protocols, the things that are a bigger risk to your business. So maybe we can ignore those and focus on the other things. Our next poll question: does your organization currently use any attack surface management tools? Extensively? Sometimes. We're thinking about it, and no, we're not gonna. Attack surface mapping, a lot of times that's going to be something like your Rapid7, your Tenable, your Qualys. You can get into some other things. Oh, we're about one-third. Yes, extensively. No, we're thinking about it. And no, we have no plans to. Interesting, there's nobody in the we're not consistently going to do it bucket. I'll give this another minute or so. Not and we have no plans to. That's creeping up to 40% now. A few not consistently popping in. If you're using something that isn't one of the ones I've mentioned, like your Rapid7 or your Tenable, your Nexpose, maybe your CrowdStrike, if you're using something different and you feel like popping it in the chat, that would strictly be for my own curiosity, what you're using. Or if you're using something homegrown. About 43% consistently now, extensively now. That's higher than I expected. We're hanging about 30%. No, we have no plans to. About 15% each for yes, but not consistently. No, we're considering it. Okay. Or about 50% extensively now. That's impressive. That's a good crowd here. Y'all are surprising me. We're down to 22%. We're not considering it. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. But this is interesting. Integrating your ASM tools with firewall management. We can take a direct connect to Rapid7 or Tenable, Qualys. We can take CSV imports. We can take API imports from other things. Like I've got people doing it with different source systems. Hey, go about, tell me what rules have access here. And if you want to talk about the APIs to do that, look us up, get us a demo, ping someone, ping me. You need to know quickly, here's a threat. What do I have in my network? Risk equals vulnerability times access. There's a potential vulnerability. Here's some oddball ports they're seeing activity on. Here's some IPs. Where's my access? Automated management. Again, we want to help you people do what they're doing best. Get the ASM tools, Firemon in conjunction with something else, Firemon alone. Get the firewall, get things updated, get the monitoring going. Like I said, I used to use my compliance framework for all kinds of crazy things that have nothing to do with compliance. If InfraGard came to me and said, here's 7 IOC IPs and here's 2 oddball ports, we would actually run that as a compliance report and give it to the team that needed to do the remediation. Then I would run it once a week after our change window for remediating that kind of thing, unless it was an urgent all hands on deck fire, then we do it more often. And see, where's the team at? Let's not create alert fatigue as well. If I can pack Saturday night, let's not run a report Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If I can pack Saturday night, let's run that report on Monday morning and see where the team's at and see what we need to queue up for the next Saturday. That can be as important as your tools. How are you using them? How are you alerting your teams? When are you running those reports? And how are you setting that up so that they've got actionable info, but they're not getting so much actionable info that it becomes just noise and they're not hearing anything anymore? How are you going to get those updates in there? How are you going to make sure that you're closing those holes? Integration, again, if we're integrating with something like your Tenable, your Qualys, your Rapid7, maybe you've got a SOAR piping in, we want to see here where's the visibility for this IP. You can real time. This threat came in today. Here's a SOAR piping over the API. Here's the 7 rules that give you access to that. That integration can happen between those two platforms much faster than any of us mere mortals can do it. Technology's here. Let's let it work for us and let's spend our time on the things that we need to, like getting those rules out of there and figuring out what the impact is. The machines are going to be very good at telling you the where. Let's look at the why. Let's use the people for that. Measuring success. What does success look like to you? This is another thing I work with clients on a lot, and it kind of depends on where you're at in that crawl, walk, run. Are you in the crawl, where you're in the bucket, where you very rarely look at your policies? Crawl, our measuring success there may be taking our top 10 most vulnerable ports and getting them out, or getting ACLs around them, or getting zone-based controls. You may need to allow SSH for an application you have, but we want to put some zone-based controls around there. So SSH is allowed, it's allowed on that Palo Alto, but it's only from this one internal zone to this other internal zone. Can't leave those two zones, can't go elsewhere in the network, can't go to the DMZ, and generally absolutely cannot go out egress. If you're in the run phase where you are assessing your rules monthly, maybe you're down to fine-tuning. Maybe we need to start looking at rule consolidation. Everything costs. If you've got 10,000 rules on your firewall and we can winnow that down to 8,000 by consolidation and reordering, you've got some computational power back. And then there's the people, I'd say probably 90% of my clients fall somewhere in between. You're doing things, nobody's got too much people, nobody's got too much money, you're doing the best you can with what you have. Let's use the technology again to do those cleanups for you. Figure out your attack surface, start closing those holes, and let your people do what they're good at. Let them do the why. Let the technology give you what needs to be done. Other indicators of improvement, fewer security incidents. An incident doesn't have to be a breach, doesn't have to be something that requires a notification. Incident could be you've got your TCP 1742 that is a critical application for your business. What did we have in a firewall rule that went through and stopped that app from working? That caused me 4 hours of downtime. That 4 hours of downtime cost me X amount of dollars for my business. Where do I have fewer compliance violations? The auditor came in, they looked at me from a SOX perspective. Last time I had these findings, and now I don't have those findings anymore. Maybe I've gone down from 5 critical to a couple very minor ones. A lot of clients come to us. Unfortunately, I wish they'd come sooner. Everybody's scared of the C word, the compliance word. They come to me after an auditor has said, hey, you've got to do better. You're under NCUA, you're under FFIEC, you're under some financial, you're under some HIPAA. You've got to do better. You've got violations here. We're going to help you. We're going to get you there. But let's start now. Let's start before that auditor's handed you a $250,000 fine. And then alignment with your goals. Back to the little C compliance. What does your organization want to do? What does your organization want to have happen? What policies and procedures are you following? Do you want to tighten up your rules? Do you want to get some more time out of your firewall where we can do some rule consolidation, some reordering, and get some computational power back? Maybe instead of replacing that firewall next year, we can get you 2 or 3 out of it. Simply because everything costs. Everything costs in computational power. Our takeaways. Optimize the things. Make sure you've done your ASM, your attack surface mapping, and that your firewall policies are falling within that. Least privilege, again, especially if you need to let somebody come in, make sure that the only people that have the keys to the house are the people that need to be in there. Where can you do your integration? Where can we integrate with your ASM tools? Maybe even you're doing some internal scripting. You could integrate that with firewall management and decide what success means to you. And I tell people, don't let your vendor define what success means to you. I'm going to help you get there. I'm going to walk through that best practices with you, figure out where your maturity is at today and where to clean up. But you need to define what success means to you, what progress means to you. Maybe your progress is to get all of the top 10 critical ports out of your environment. Maybe you've had an audit finding. You've had an auditor that says, hey, we're going to charge you $100,000. Maybe success is making it through your next audit. Figure out what that looks like. Figure out what your outcome is. Then you're going to have better conversations with me. You're going to have better conversations with Firemon. We're going to have better conversations across the board. And obviously, I want to talk to you about Firemon. Real-time firewall policy management. We connect directly to the devices. Most things I tell people we've got within 5 to 15 minutes. Data collectors attached to the device. They go out. They bring in the information. They say, here's what we need to know. They send it back to the application server, writes to the database. Depending on the size of your device, it's generally 5 to 15 for that process to happen. Attack surface mapping. Again, we can integrate with those other platforms. Everything is customizable. You can build those compliance reports. Again, don't let the compliance word scare you. You can report on all kinds of things that way. We've been doing this for a really long time. We're adapting to changing threats all the time. I constantly talk to clients. I need to know how to find this in my environment. Haven't heard that one, but we can usually figure it out pretty quickly. Here's how you can get there. Since there is a language behind this, you can query all kinds of things about your policy that I might not have thought of, but the building bricks are all there. We're going to be able to get you whatever you need to know about those policies. Obviously, hit us up. Reach out to me. My email is lisa.wallace@firemon.com. We'd be happy to get you a demo with one of your engineers. If you have a, hey, crazy lady, you didn't talk about this, and I've got that kind of question for you, pop it into the chat now, pop it into those questions, or ping me, ask me later. I love to have those kind of conversations. So what have we got for questions?
Yeah, a lot of questions coming in. By the way, I love the story about Windows XP. As a long-time technology journalist, especially covering Microsoft, I just remember writing about those deadlines for years. The end of support for XP was 10 years ago now.
But everybody's got one, and they've got a legacy reason why they have to have it. I'm not negating your legacy reason, but let's protect it.
Yeah, really, really good advice on that. So yeah, we do have a ton of questions that have come in here. The first one is about frameworks. They're wondering, how does attack surface management help align with frameworks like PCI, DSS, or NIST?
PCI is actually the perfect example there.
Okay.
NIST is applicable. NIST requires you to do a little more thinking about your environment and that prioritization I was talking about. But PCI begins with define what your cardholder network is. Define what touches or handles cardholder data. When I talk about mapping, taking your napkin and mapping out the highest priority, that cardholder network for PCI is going to be your highest priority. What is talking? If you look at PCI, it talks about, unauthorized and authorized protocols. What do you have going on there that's in the unauthorized list? What do you have talking to other parts of the network that shouldn't be? Have you segmented that off properly? That is classic attack surface mapping, and it's a prime use case for that, and it's a prime use case for using something like Firemon.
Okay, great. Next question here, looking for some examples on the integrations. Can you provide examples of ASM tools that integrate with Firemon?
Rapid7, Tenable, and Qualys we can bring into our risk framework. I have clients doing things, again, like SOAR. Swim lane is one I can think of. The APIs are all open. I've got some clients that have even rolled their own. They don't see our interface. They have taken and they've built a dashboard. Maybe they've got something like a Splunk. They'll take a Splunk alert, run it through their dashboard, send it back to Firemon, tell me where this access exists. And Firemon will pop back, here's the 12 rules that allow this access that Splunk has told you is problematic. They see everything from the dashboard because we've got that wide open API. They see what they want to see in the way they want to see it. ITSM solutions, we do a lot with ITSM, ServiceNow, Jira, Remedy, got some people doing Sharewell. Again, the API is open. So whatever you need to see, maybe you got something with an application, you need to see what applications. There's an app ID in Palo that you need to see, where there are rules that are allowing that and allowing some type of activity.
Okay.
If there's something out there, I probably talked to somebody about it within the last couple of years.
All right. Yeah, a lot of integrations there and the open API. Okay, super. Next question, wondering how can organizations effectively implement adaptive firewall policies to respond to emerging threats in real time?
That's where integrating with something like your SOAR, your IDS, your IPS to go out, and you can actually, this is simplest done if you've got Policy Planner, which is Firemon automation. You have a threat come in and say, an example might be Palo Alto's EDL, their dynamic block list.
Okay.
My SOAR system says I've got these 15 new IPs, I need to drop them on the EDL, and I need to push a change out to make sure that the EDL gets updated. or I've got an ACL over here and I need to add these new IPs to it. That can be a closed loop. You can have the automation handle all of that. You can have an engineer look at it in the middle. Again, crawl, walk, run. Nobody starts out day one letting their source system talk to Firemon and letting it push changes out. But let's start looking at what that path looks like. Where are you getting your threat information from? And what format are you getting that in? Then how can we get it in to figure out where your exposures are? And how can we get the changes in to get that access out if it needs to go away? That's very customizable. I've got people doing it a lot of different ways. But again, it depends on where they're getting it from and the format it's coming in.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Hey, this next question, this might have to do with integrations as well, but the question is, how do you best manage the attack surface of vendors or supply chain actors? Is that something that you guys deal with at all, or is that something that you kind of hand off and maybe integrate?
Vendors is where I start having a conversation. You should be doing some due diligence with your vendor questionnaire. What do they need access to your environment for? What do they need to do with it? And who are they going to let use that access? And then again, figure out what the least privilege they need to have in your network is. I've had a ton of people come and say, but my vendor says I have to have OpenFTP and I have to have it. No, you don't. You can use SFTP. You can use something more secure. Maybe you've got a bucket in your DMZ they drop things into. Let's figure out the minimum, that least privilege that they need. I tell people all the time, and I tell it for a wide variety of things, including the attack surface management, tell me what you need your outcome to be. Talk to your vendor and figure out what the outcome needs to be, and then let's talk about how to get you there. Because a lot of times, if you let the vendor solution how they're going to get in there, they're solutioning on the easiest thing for them, which may not be the most secure thing for your environment. Tell me what you want their outcome to be, and then let's work with the framework to look at your environment, look at your firewalls, and figure out how to get them that access.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Hey, this next question I'm really interested in, but they're asking, what are the best practices for enforcing least privilege across large-scale organizations?
Start with your any's. Start with what I call the stupids. Where do you have an any hanging out? Where do you have an any source, any service, any destination? Then look at, are there compensating controls like zone-based controls? Have you got an any source, but it's got a zone? That's probably more secure than an any source that's got 7 source zones. Do you really need all 7 of those? Let's use TFA. Let's use the traffic flow analysis. Let's look at what's actually happening on there. Well, same for destination. Where have you got an any without any compensating controls around it? Maybe you've got a tunnel. Maybe you've got an MPLS connection in there, and you may be fine. But again, can we put something else around it? Can we make sure there's a zone in there? Can we make sure there's specific IPs? I dislike any's even with some of the compensating controls. They just kind of make me break out in hives. But let's put as many compensating controls around them as we can. Any service, do you really need any service? Let's winnow that down to what you actually need to happen. Yes, that's easier. Another one of my favorite incident response stories, doing work for a company. They had 2 guys managing a whole bunch of Palo Altos. Very bottom of their policy, instead of an any drop, it was an any allow. If it wasn't blocked above, it was allowed. No big surprise, I was there to do incident response on that one. Have you got rules out there that are this source to this destination and it's any service because it was easier? Let's get the stuff that was historically done because it was easier out of there. Tighten up that access.
All right. Excellent. Probably got time for one more here. This is a good one to close on. They're wondering, what emerging technologies or trends do you foresee shaping the future of attack surface management and firewall policy optimization?
It's the buzzword of the moment, but I really do think zero trust is going to make a difference. And I don't mean zero trust with regard to any technology. For a long time, firewall management was tell me what you need to have, and let's take the broad brush and only narrow it down if we need to. And zero trust starts with, let's presume you need nothing and convince me of what you do need. And whether you do that holistically with a firemon, with your people, or with a zero trust platform in conjunction with a firemon, I think that's where the future is going. It's going to be start with nothing and convince me with what you do need, and convince me how long you need it.
Okay.
Nothing should go in there for eternity. Things like rule expiration dates and scheduled time on rules where the platform supports it are important.
All right. Excellent. Well, it looks like we're running out of time. So, Lisa, just, if somebody wants to get started with Firemon or find out more, what would you recommend?
Go ahead and contact us. Again, tell me where it hurts. Tell me where you want to get. Let's set up a conversation with one of our engineers and figure out how to get you there. If I talk to 5 clients, they're going to have 5 different outcomes that they need. So let's get customized. Let's figure out where you need to get. Let's worry about how to get you there and how to use the technology to improve that so your people are spending time on the things they need to spend time on.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks, Lisa. This was really interesting presentation. Really appreciate all the stories and for all the insights here in the Q&A as well. Thanks a lot.
Happy to help. Thanks for having me.
All right. All right, we're going to let Lisa go there, and we're going to move on to our final piece of business, which is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that $250 Amazon gift card today is Richard Zhu from Tennessee. So congratulations to Richard. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Firemon again for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.